Ce știm noi din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și scut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Țărul pe drum știut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. E pentru că pe lume partidul s-a dulci cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce-nseamnă ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de plin l-am priceput, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. пустяк, в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, веют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы, будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы. Милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути. И он продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь.
Hello everybody and welcome along. It is the evening of the 16th of August 2026 and we are here tonight with a special live stream looking at the case of Jason Arday, the late former Cambridge professor who was found dead recently in London in a case of apparent suicide, though the official verdict has yet to be reached with that particular case. Now, what we're going to be looking at tonight is not the death of this man, and it is, of course, regardless of whatever he did or did not do in his life, it is a tragedy for his family. And I should give a warning that we're going to be mentioning suicide, of course, on this program. So if you don't like that for whatever reason and don't want to hear that, then just skip ahead slightly to about the 3-minute mark in this video. Now, the reason why I'm discussing this case is because the example of Jason Arday is not unique in terms of somebody who it turns out was an academic fraud being insanely over-promoted. And the reality is that academia in late stage imperialism is absolutely full of academic frauds, most of whom get away with it because most of whom are from the petty bourgeoisie or indeed the bourgeoisie and are mostly white men. Now, those who say that Arday was taken down because he was black, thus they have some truth on their side. But the other side of it is that he was also promoted in part because of his personal characteristics and what they could bring to Cambridge University. So, this is a story of the double edged sword that is identity politics and those who fall upon that sword, who seek to wield it. And it is proof again that you can be made by the establishment and employed by the establishment, which Jason Arday very much was, and then destroyed by that same establishment when you no longer serve any purpose for them or you become embarrassing to them. And that is the tragic case of Jason Arday, a man who marketed himself in such a way as to be useful to Cambridge University and its reputation, in such a way as made him very famous and garnered him quite a considerable amount of money in a short period of time, but which ultimately turned on him and destroyed him. So we will start with the basics. That on Friday afternoon, that is the 14th of August, this Friday just gone, just after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, paramedics were called to an address on Daly Thompson Way in Battersea in South London. There they found a 41-year-old man in an unresponsive condition. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The man's name was Jason Arday, and until 9 days earlier, he had been the most celebrated and celebrity black academic in Britain. He was the youngest black professor and one of the few black professors to have been appointed to the University of Cambridge in its 800-year history, an 800-year history of providing the personnel for the machines of the ruling class. A man whose entire life story that he sold had been featured on breakfast television in both Britain and the United States. So tonight we're going to go into the details of how this story was built, how it fell apart, and the forces who built it. Because the real scandal here is not Arday's fabrications. It is a university that bought him, a legal profession and a police force that shielded him from criticism for quite a long time, the publisher that bought his memoir with the falsehoods in it, the media machine that first built him up and then savagely tore him down. This is Liberation News Network. Stay with us for the full story. So tonight we are doing this 1 hour special on what the British press has spent the last fortnight calling the Jason Arday affair. Now, the important thing to emphasize at this stage is that, of course, his family have asked to be left alone. And so we're not going to go into the details of his death and apparent suicide. And so this is not going to be a program that speculates as to how he died. The police have said that the death is unexpected, but not believed to be suspicious, and the work will now be completed by the coroner. Nor is it a program designed to kick a man who cannot answer back. Everything you will hear tonight is drawn from the documented public record, from the Telegraph, the Times, the Guardian, the Atlantic, the Times Higher Education Supplement, and from the statements made by the academic institutions involved. Where something is an allegation rather than an established fact, I will say so. Arday himself consistently denied dishonesty, and several inquiries into his record were running at the time of his death. But what we are going to do is the work that the media, the bourgeois press in Britain, cannot and will not do. Because this is not a story about one man and his deeds or misdeeds. It is a story about what British universities have become. Because the appearance of equality is here manufactured and sold. This story is also about how defamation lawyers and police officers can be deployed to stop journalists asking basic questions, and how a working class black man was raised up as a symbol by the establishment, used and then discarded. Tonight we are going to do three things. First, we're going to look at the theory involved, because without that, everything looks like a disconnected event, and when it is anything but. Then we're going to look at the record, the full dated and sourced account of what happened with regard to the career of Jason Arday from 2023 to last week. And third, the question that matters most: who benefited from all of this? Who paid for it? And what should we, as socialists and communists, actually take from this affair? So let's look at the theory first. This being the university as an ideological machine, a machine for the production and reproduction of bourgeois ideology. Now, let's start with a claim that will sound rather sweeping, and then I will make it concrete. The university in a country like Britain is not primarily a place where knowledge is pursued. That happens there, certainly, but that's not what the institution of the university is for in an imperialist country. The university is part of what the French Marxist Louis Althusser called the ideological state apparatus, the set of institutions, schools, universities, churches, the press, the culture industry, whose job it is to reproduce the existing social order, not with bullets and batons, but with ideas. The police and the army hold the line with force. The ideological apparatus holds it by teaching each generation, year after year, where it belongs, and by certifying who is allowed or supposed to rule. Cambridge University, along with Oxford, is the purest example that we have here. For 8 centuries, it has taken the children of the British bourgeoisie, and in the last century, the children of the ruling classes from around the world, and returned them with the credentials that make their authority look like merit. They look like they deserve them. Roughly 7% of British children go to private schools. That's very small, but they take roughly a third of Cambridge's undergraduate places. Year after year, government after government, this remains the same. This is not an accident of talent. It is the machine working as it was designed to work. Now, a machine like that accumulates problems of legitimacy. If everyone can see that the pipeline runs from largely white, very posh, fee-paying schools to an ancient college, into the civil service, the law, the City of London, and the government, then the claim that any of this is based on merit starts to fray. And so an institution like Cambridge needs symbols, it needs evidence displayed in public that this machine is open to all. And that is where the concept of symbolic capital comes in. The currency of prestige and appearance that institutions trade in. A university that cannot change its class composition, and Cambridge absolutely cannot change its class composition. It would be to deny its very purpose if it did. They can still, however, try to change their image. They can buy a symbol, and symbols in this marketized university system are very cheap compared to redistribution of power and money. And here's one more piece of theory from Antonio Gramsci. Every social order needs what Gramsci called the organic intellectuals, a stratum of experts, administrators, and commentators who organize consent for the ruling order and give it a plausible intellectual face. Universities mass produce this stratum, but here is the twist that matters. The apparatus also needs organic intellectuals of its own self-image, people whose biography can be made to testify that the institution itself is good. A working class, autistic, black professor of sociology at Cambridge is, for that institution, not an employee. He is a walking press release. His existence says to the wider population, look at him. He is our professor now. We have employed him. Look how far we've come from the days when many of us were involved in slave trading. And because this program and this network deals in concrete facts rather than vibes, here is what the marketization of the university ideological machine has actually meant. Tuition fees of over £9,000 a year have turned students into customers and degrees into products. So universities now compete for market share. And what competes best for market share is image, not scholarship. The research funding race rewards headline generating names because a famous professor pulls in grant money, and visibility equals revenue. The teaching is done increasingly by casualized staff on hourly contracts, while the institution's public face is built on a handful of marketable stars. Vice chancellors are paid like chief executives because that is what they now are. In a system like that, a spectacular human story is not a byproduct of the university's work, it is part of the work, a line item in the marketing budget that happens to be a living, breathing person. And one more layer here, because it runs through all the details of the story that follows. Over the last 40 years, as British higher education was marketized with fees, league tables, the research funding race, the competition for the profitable international student market, etc., a whole professional layer grew up inside and around the universities, whose function is the management of inequality's appearance, equality and diversity officers, race equality consultancies, the trustee boards of the big anti-racist charities, the widening participation circuit. We have said on this program before, and we will say it again. This layer does not exist to abolish the structures that promote and produce racial inequality. It exists to administer them, to turn a material problem, which is about class, resources, housing, schooling, and the condition of labor, into a problem of representation, which can be solved by issuing reports, having mentoring schemes, or by a single spectacular appointment to a high-profile role. That is a structural function in action. It is why, after decades of such reports, Cambridge, when Jason Arday was employed in 2023, had a grand total of 5 other black professors, 5 in 800 years. And finally, the role of the bourgeois press. The British press is not some kind of neutral arbiter or guarantor of truth and decency in this story or indeed any story. The British press, the British bourgeois press, is in reality a collection of businesses owned by the ruling class, in which human beings are at any moment built up or torn down, depending upon what sells at the time. Now keep that in mind because Jason Arday was processed by that machine twice. Once on the way up in 2023 when they made him, when the profiles were glowing, and once in the last 3 weeks when the demolition job was done on his life. And there is one more Leninist distinction that you will need to bear in mind for this program. One of Lenin's central points about the bourgeois state was that it has 2 faces. The ideological apparatus that persuades and the repressive apparatus, the police, the courts, and the prisons that compels. What makes this affair remarkable is that you can see the baton get passed between the 2 functions in real time. When the ideological management of Jason Arday's story was challenged by journalists over a year ago, the response was not an argument. It was a letter from the law firm Carter Ruck, a notorious law firm. Then it was the bringing in of the police. The persuasion machine called in the compelling machine. Remember that when we reach the events of 2025, because you will see it happen twice. This is the theory. Now let's see the machine at work. This is the record. Now with regard to Jason Arday himself, he was born on the 9th of May 1985 in South London to Ghanaian parents. He was raised on a council estate in the London area of Clapham. The narrative that was later built around him, and I want to be careful here because parts of this narrative are now disputed, and I will flag each of the disputed parts as I go along. And his narrative was this. He was diagnosed at age 3 with autism and global developmental delay. He was unable to speak until he was 11, communicating through sign language. Unable to read or write until he was 18. Told at a careers office in his own stated account that the best he could hope for was unpaid volunteering. From there, the recorded and verifiable part of the story runs like this. He obtained a BTEC at Merton College, a degree in education studies with physical education at the University of Surrey, a master's at St Mary's University at Twickenham, also in London, then a PhD at Liverpool John Moores University that was submitted in 2015 on peer mentoring among student teachers. Completed, so he said, while working as a PE lecturer by day, that's physical education for the Americans amongst us, stacking supermarket shelves by night, and wrote his thesis whilst on a train between London and Liverpool. And then his career accelerated in a way that should have made any appointments committee pause and look twice. His first journal article appears in 2018. The same year, he is a senior lecturer at Roehampton University. By the end of the decade, he is an associate professor of sociology at Durham. And note this, the university's deputy executive dean for people and culture and administrative diversity role. In January 2022, he becomes professor of sociology of education at the University of Glasgow, one of the youngest professors in the country. And in late 2022, announced in February 2023, Cambridge appoints him to its professorial chair in the sociology of education with a fellowship at Jesus College. 10 years, in other words, from a doctorate to a Cambridge chair. Now, rapid rises do happen, genius happens, but a rise like that normally comes with a body of work that has been somewhat tested, cited, attacked, and defended across years of scholarly argument. What Arday had instead was something else, and the university said so itself out loud and on camera. The head of the Faculty of Education, Hilary Kremin, told Arday, and I quote, "We are so lucky to have you. You are the best in the world in terms of the research that you do. The best in the world." And the university's Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Bhaskar Veera, announced that Arday's experiences, quote, highlight the barriers faced by many underrepresented groups. Listen to the order of those sentences. The life story first, the research second. What Cambridge was buying was Arday's biography. And the biography was extraordinary, or rather, it was presented as extraordinary. More than £5 million raised for over 70 charities, though that figure was later revised down sharply, and we'll come to those details later. The claim that he'd run 30 marathons in 35 days, 9 of them, he said, whilst having a hairline fracture of the fibula, 600 miles in 6 days, a feat that, as The Guardian later noted, would have placed him among the greatest endurance athletes that have ever lived. He carried the Olympic flame in 2012. He was shortlisted 3 times for the Daily Mirror's Pride of Britain Award. And over the following 3 years, the honours accumulated exactly as the machine is designed to accumulate them and to give them out. Honorary doctorates from Anglia Ruskin and from his old University St Mary's, a trusteeship of the British Sociological Association, a trusteeship of the Runnymede Trust, Britain's leading race equality think tank, a patronage of the Adult Literacy Trust. By 2025, he was named as a collaborator on more than $10 million worth of grants from UK Research and Innovation and the National Institute for Health and Care Research. And in April of 2024, the literary agency Jennifer Gates sold his memoir to the publisher Simon & Schuster in a preempt, a proposal the Atlantic later described as promising, quote, an awe-inspiring tale of near-mythic proportions. Arday himself claimed that the advance was for 1.4 million, currency unspecified. Now, I presume it was either in dollars or pounds. And through all of this, the media machine did its part of the work. The profiles wrote themselves in the BBC, CBS, and on Good Morning America. The same story told the same way with the same details repeated from the same institutional sources. The Atlantic would later report that Arday may have been at his peak, the world's most famous living sociologist. The honorary degree citations read like folk tales because nobody checks a folk tale. That is the point of the genre. An honorary citation is not a verification, it is an incantation. And each honour made the next one safer. Every university that garlanded him had the last one's garland as its due diligence. I want to stop here and ask the question the theory from part one makes unavoidable. At any point in that ascent, Roehampton, Durham, Glasgow, Cambridge, the trusteeships, the publishing, did any single institution verify what it was actually celebrating? Did anyone check the thesis before appointing him to examine other people's research? Did anyone phone Ohio State or Glasgow about the visiting professorships that he claimed to have later, which appeared on his Jesus College profile? Positions which both universities now say never existed. Did anyone at Simon & Schuster Publishers ask for his medical records after his claim to having been in a coma, or the records of the marathons he claimed to have completed? We know the answer because the moment anyone did the checking, the whole edifice came crumbling down. The institutions did not verify the story because the institutions did not need the story to be true. They needed the story to be told. And that is what symbolic capital means. The value lies in circulation, not in the substance. And what circulated between 2023 and 2025 was the sheer goodness of Cambridge University in appointing Jason Arday. The story was not about Jason Arday's scholarship. His scholarship, as you are about to hear, nobody in authority ever seriously examined, not once. And here's the part of the story that Cambridge University did not want told, because it begins the moment that Jason Arday arrives. In May of 2023, within weeks of Cambridge appointing Arday, Dave Harris, an emeritus professor and veteran academic author, wrote to Arday about what he called puzzling similarities between Arday's 2018 paper on the mental health of black and ethnic minority students and an earlier British medical journal open study by the epidemiologist Anjum Memon and colleagues. Arday's reply, which has since been published, is worth hearing in full because what it reveals is how this was going to be handled. He told Harris, and I quote, "Anything further from you will be considered bullying and harassment." And in a longer response, he told Harris, quote, "A monument to the fact that we live in a society where grammar is valued above equity." Grammar above equity, a clever line. It is also the line of a man who has understood correctly that in the institutions he now moved through, an accusation of bullying was a more powerful weapon than a footnote. And he was not bluffing. The Committee for Academic Freedom has since established that Arday reported Dave Harris to the police. Let that sink in for a moment. An inquiry over a man's scholarship resulted in a police complaint. The Metropolitan Police referred it to Devon and Cornwall Police, who in the end declined to investigate. So let's just think about that for a moment. A scholar who raised a documented textual similarities that were real enough that the journal that published Arday's work later issued a correction, found himself being reported to the police for harassment for making an inquiry. That same month, in May of 2023, the sociologist Martin Hammersley wrote to Cambridge's Faculty of Education reporting, in his words, substantial plagiarism. Cambridge's institutional response was nothing that we can find. The journal corrected the paper rather than retracting it. And other researchers later found that the corrected version contained further changes that were never acknowledged, including alterations to how the interviews that were in the journal article were said to have been recorded, and a quiet deletion of at least one quote. Now, Harris did not stop. In 2023, he alerted both Cambridge and Liverpool John Moores University to suspected plagiarism. And that was in Arday's PhD thesis itself. Now we come to the episode that is one of the strangest bits of the whole affair, because it shows the machinery of suppression in action. Now, in September of 2025, a man called Jack Grove, who is a senior reporter for the Times Higher Education Supplement, which is a trade paper for higher education, had a story ready to go. He had assembled a 63-page dossier of text comparisons. He had ultimately submitted 97 pages of evidence to Cambridge and Liverpool John Moores University. He had the material reviewed by David Sanders, a Purdue University biochemist and one of the leading academic misconduct investigators in the world. Sanders' verdict was 4 words: there is no question that there is extensive plagiarism. Grove did what journalists do. He emailed Arday for his right of reply. After his third email in 2 months, he got a reply from Carter Ruck. That is Carter Ruck, the defamation firm whose name is synonymous with the silencing of journalism in Britain, a firm that represents various different Middle Eastern oligarchs and historically has represented the Church of Scientology. Its letter suggested that the Times Higher Education Supplement's scrutiny of a black academic may, quote, be racially motivated. Now, THE, Times Higher Education Supplement, are not a particularly brave and crusading outlet. Faced with months of litigation, potentially, they decided to kill the story. And then, on the 18th of November 2025, the Metropolitan Police received a complaint of harassment against the journalist Jack Grove. The Metropolitan Police investigated Grove for 4 months, even though he was never interviewed. On the 3rd of February this year, an officer from the Met phoned Grove and told him that the case was closed and instructed him not to contact Professor Arday again because of the professor's mental health. Grove was never told who had complained. Cambridge claimed that it wasn't them. But then again, why should we believe them? Metropolitan Police Commissioner Mark Rowley has since gone on LBC and admitted, quote, we dropped the ball on that one. Let's not beat around the bush. The complaint, he conceded, should have been screened out at the start, which leads me to think that it might have been Cambridge University themselves who put it forward. And Grove himself, writing in Times Higher Education Supplement after the story had finally broken, named the deeper cost of those lost 9 months because a verified story was parked by the fact that a legally threatening note arrived and a police investigation was set up. It was left to be broken instead, in Grove's words, by a Substack blogger who knew exactly the potency of what he had found. So the silencing of the Times Higher Education Supplement by the police and by either Cambridge or Arday's lawyers, we don't know who commissioned them, did not protect the truth. It delivered the truth, gift-wrapped to an open reactionary and a self-confessed racist in the form of Nathan Coffness, the man who broke the story. So consider what this sequence means. An actual reporter doing an act of journalism asked a powerful institution's professor to comment on documented evidence, spent a third of a year under a police investigation, and then was warned off questioning the professor further by the police. Meanwhile, the substance of the charge was never answered, not once, but that is what the repressive apparatus looks like when it works for the reputation of a powerful institution. It's not a knock on the door, but a harassment file, a lawyer's letter, and quiet phone calls telling the journalist to drop the investigation. While this was happening, Liverpool John Moores University ran its own confidential investigation into Arday's thesis, an investigation that had Grove's dossier in front of it, and even considered allegations of plagiarism. In March 2026, it cleared Arday of everything beyond a, quote, honest and reasonable error, judging the overlap with earlier work to be done, quote, well within the accepted range of compliance with the academic standards of the time. Now keep that phrase in mind, the academic standards of the time. We will come back to it later. In April of this year, Arday gave a plenary at the British Sociological Association's conference in Edinburgh, in which he described a right-wing playbook, direct quote, to destroy black academics to be, as Arday put it, a cancer. And the right-wingers wanted black academics to be eradicated from academia. One might think he knew what was coming, and in June it duly arrived. And incidentally, he wasn't wrong about that. People like Nathan Coffness, people like those who collaborated with him and promoted him, do want to see black academics driven out entirely. So on the 13th of June, the aforementioned Coffness, a former Cambridge philosopher researcher who had been dropped by Emmanuel College in 2024 over his writings on race, a man who openly calls for what he refers to as a, quote, hereditarian revolution, and has written that in a true, quote, meritocracy, the number of black professors would approach zero. Coffness grabbed the story and had begun reading Arday's thesis after being contacted by a Cambridge faculty member. Academia, after all, is a vicious, petty, and backbiting world. In July, Coffners published his findings on his Substack. Dozens of passages in the 2015 thesis have been lifted nearly verbatim from a 2009 Brunel University thesis by Paula Wozniak-Myers, including passages where her citations were copied and presented as Arday's own reading. Independent checks multiplied within days. The writer Ayman al-Tamimi verified instance after instance and called it, quote, research fraud, pure and simple. The philosopher Robert Chapman, who had initially defended Arday's overlaps as accidental plagiarism that should be corrected, went back through the evidence and publicly conceded that, quote, fairly extensive plagiarism had occurred, unquote. An honourable retreat and a rare one in this story. An algorithmic comparison found 460 distinct passages of 8 or more consecutive matching words, some 5,200 words, about 4% of the thesis. The longest single run is 76 words. The Telegraph's own analysis identified 188 sentences identical or highly similar and put the statistical chance of coincidental overlap at 1 in 100 billion. Even the thesis's title appears to be derived from Wozniak-Myers's, reproducing a misplaced apostrophe that is correct in her title and wrong in his. And assessors who went through the dissertation found that failures went beyond plagiarism. The primary research based on 4 participants, a length 25% over the limit, missing instruments, recommendations unsupported by the research, and the 4 participants' names full names printed in the acknowledgements. But Cambridge still defended their man at this stage. On the 24th of July, with the Times and Telegraph analyses published, the university called the scrutiny, quote, a vile campaign to undermine that is Arday's credibility, and pointed to the Liverpool John Moores University clearance and the journal corrections as proof that he had been exonerated. Then, on the 1st of August, The Guardian published Lanra Bakare's investigation, and the story jumped from scholarship to the biography. Arday's claim of raising £5 million was revised when challenged to the efforts of, quote, a syndicate of around 100 people over 20 years, whose names Arday said he could not supply because of non-disclosure agreements. The 600 miles in 6 days that he claimed to have run were revised to 12 days with rest days. It does not appear then in his published memoir. The pig's head that he claimed that had been sent to his parents' home, which he said the Met had traced to a butcher's shop, the Metropolitan Police denied any such inquiry ever took place. The armed masked men that he claimed had turned up at his workplace, there turned out to have been no CCTV and no witnesses to this. And when Bakare, the writer of that piece, put the absence of evidence to him, Arday gave the answer that will probably define this whole affair. He said, and I quote, to be honest with you, I thought you'd just believe me. Why would I lie? I thought you'd just believe me. In 6 words, the whole system defined, because everyone had believed him. Everyone had bought the product that he was selling. So why wouldn't they believe him now? The product, after all, had been good for a number of years. The following week brought the questions over his affiliations. Ohio State said it had no record of him, despite his claim of a visiting professorship. Glasgow University, where he really had been a professor, said that his visiting professorship that he had claimed that he'd had was a fiction as well. Nelson Mandela University said he had been a fixed-term adjunct and an association that ended in November 2025, not a visiting professor. Birkbeck said it had no record of the counselling masters he claimed that he had. The Telegraph revealed that a book he listed as published by Palgrave Macmillan since 2019, Being Young, Black and Male, had never been published at all. Simon & Schuster's website quickly changed the previously published 3 books to 2 books. The Atlantic compared the 2024 book proposal with the finished memoir and found the proposal's his claimed medical problems, such as a 3-month coma, locked-in syndrome, and testicular cancer, had all vanished from his biography, replaced by 2 brain tumors. And on the 6th of August, the Times reported evidence pointing past plagiarism to falsified research. The same interview quote attributed in different publications to different people. No evidence of ethics approval. A claimed funder, the charity Mind, which told journalists it funded no such work. On the morning of the 5th of August, the University of Cambridge announced an investigation into his, quote, academic qualifications and honorary appointments. Within hours, Arday had resigned. In an open letter hosted by the Jolyon Morm-run Good Law Project, about whom more later, a letter the Times later reported had been flagged by AI detection software as likely machine-written. The, quote, the letter contained the following quotation. The relentless accusations, speculation, and public commentary, Arday writes, have taken a profound toll on me, on those I love. I need time simply to be myself again. When that time comes, I will return. Jesus College accepted his resignation. Students at the Faculty of Education began asking in the pages of the student press and beyond whether work he had supervised would be looked at again. The cancellations and reckonings came in a rush over the following days. The book tour, an Edinburgh bookshop event, a fireside chat at the Royal Geographical Society, a speech in Cambridge, these were all called off. Scores of Cambridge academics, organised with the Professor of Post-Colonial Studies, Priyamvada Gopal, signed a letter demanding an independent inquiry into how the appointments had ever been made in the first place. Durham University and Glasgow University announced reviews of their own hiring practices, and Queen's University Belfast opened an investigation into a 2021 article he had co-authored with staff from their university. On the 9th of August, he resigned his trusteeship of the British Sociological Association, and on the 11th of August, 3 days before Arday's death, Simon & Schuster published his memoir in the United States. 9 days after his resignation, last Friday, on August the 14th, Arday was found dead. Now, when something collapses, you must ask, well, who built this particular entity? Who built it up? Who signed off on it? So let's go through the institutions one by one and name what each of them did. Liverpool John Moores University accepted, supervised, and examined a doctoral thesis that multiple independent assessors have since judged to be both extensively plagiarized and below doctoral standard. A thesis that one assessor said should have been referred back or failed outright. It then received a formal alert in 2023, ran an investigation with the journalist Jack Grove's 97 pages in front of it, and in March of this year declared that the overlap to be in the accepted range of compliance with the academic standards of the time. Remember that phrase from earlier. That phrase is a confession. What were the standards of the time at a post-1992 university under heavy market pressure, competing for students and for a prestige story the likes of Arday could confer? Whatever the answer, Liverpool John Moores University's position remains that a confidential procedure was conducted and that Professor Arday's PhD still stands. As of this weekend, it has announced no review of its own conduct. It is the only institution in the chain that has not even performed any act of accountability. The University of Cambridge's conduct falls into 4 phases. First, Arday's appointment, an early career scholar hired into a senior chair, and the Telegraph reporting has since examined how that appointment was made, including the involvement of the chairman of a scandal-hit think tank and advice taken from a pro-Black Lives Matter group before Arday's hiring. Second, the protection he received, the warnings given to Harris and Hammersley in May of 2023, the Cambridge officials who warned the journalist Jack Grove to stop contacting their professor, and then the letter issued by Carter Ruck, the legal firm, and the investigation by the Metropolitan Police, which Cambridge denied that they instituted, but where else could it have come from other than either Arday himself or his employers? And when the evidence finally became public in July of this year, the university called it a vile campaign. Third, the reversal. On the 5th of August, faced with accumulating evidence, Cambridge announced its own investigation, and Arday was gone within hours. Fourth, the posthumous reckoning. On the 12th and 13th of August, Cambridge Vice-Chancellor Deborah Prentice announced that the inquiry into the appointment and his tenure would be run by independent senior academics from within and beyond Cambridge, and commissioned a separate independent review of all, quote, relevant university processes, including an audit of HR practices, while insisting that the case was, quote, an aberration that must not cast aspersions on staff of colour. Now, note what is missing from all four phases. At no point, not in 2023, not in 2025, not in July of this year, is there any visible sign that the institution considered its duty of care to the human being who it had turned into a billboard. One commentator put it exactly. Cambridge's man was, quote, an asset in July and a liability in August. And be alert here in the weeks ahead to the Vice-Chancellor's chosen word, aberration. This is one of the oldest moves in the institutional playbook. Oh, it was one bad apple, one rogue individual, one isolated failure of a process. The entire purpose of the demand for an independent review, though, is to stop that word from doing its work, because nothing about this affair was an aberration, except that the whole thing fell apart in the end, and Arday himself tragically died. Now, what about the journals? The journals that published compromised articles from Arday, corrected them rather than retracted them, and the corrections were then cited for 3 years as proof that the matter was closed. David Sanders, the misconduct investigator, drew the wider lesson. Journals and universities across the board, he said, do not treat plagiarism by researchers as actionable, but sometimes the allegations are true and they must be addressed fully. A correction culture exists precisely because that no institution ever has to say the word retraction, let alone the word fraud. The publisher, Simon & Schuster, bought the memoir in April of 2024. As the scandal broke, the book was quietly edited between January and June. The £5 million raised claim was softened out of existence. The claim of being in a coma and the claim of having testicular cancer were gone. The publisher's stated position was that, quote, no allegations of plagiarism have been made with respect to the book. A sentence that answers a charge nobody had made while ignoring the charges that had. It published in the United States on the 11th of August, 3 days before its author's death. British publication remains scheduled for the 27th of August. Industry observers have been blunt about the economics. A publisher that has laid out a 7-figure advance has a contractual and commercial incentive to recoup that, not to withdraw it. Some older listeners will remember examples such as the James Frey's book, A Million Little Pieces, a fabricated addiction memoir that Random House ended up paying readers compensation over. The precedent exists. And here we turn to the wider civic apparatus, the trustee boards and the charities. When the allegations broke, the Runnymede Trust defended Arday and called the media attention racialized. The Good Law Project hosted an open letter branding the allegations, quote, entirely false, which gathered more than 10,000 signatures, among them such luminaries as Zach Polanski, John McDonnell, who still has me blocked on Twitter, Clive Lewis, the actor Colin Salmon, and many others, before several of those names were quietly withdrawn as the evidence accumulated. And consider the timing across the board. The Queen's Belfast investigation, the Durham and Glasgow reviews, the BSA trustee resignation, all of it came after Arday's fall. When he was profitable, nobody looked. When he became toxic, everybody audited. That's not a quality control system, that's a reputational and risk management system. Do you see the pattern here? Every institution in this chain had the same relationship to the truth, and that they all regarded the truth as being somebody else's problem. The examiners assumed the supervisors had supervised. Cambridge assumed that Liverpool John Moores University had certified. The journals assumed the universities had vetted. The publisher assumed the university's brand was the verification. The marketized university has outsourced quality control to a chain of assumptions. And the Arday affair is what happens and what it looks like when the chain is finally pulled tight in public. Now to the politics, because this story was never just going to stay inside the academy, and we have to be honest about the directions of fire. Firstly, the reactionaries. The man who detonated this affair, Nathan Kofners, is not a neutral guardian of scholarly standards. He is a self-declared racist, a man who peddles in what he refers to as race science, who was dropped by Emmanuel College in 2024 for this reason, who has written, as we've already said, that under his version of a so-called meritocracy, the number of black professors would approach close to 0%, and who used his expose to ask whether Cambridge was, by hiring Jason Arday, quote, making a statement that the only way to have black professors is to abandon all standards, unquote. That is not a question about footnotes. That is a political program. The same transatlantic program that brought down Claudine Gay at Harvard. That seeks the destruction of every equality initiative, and it has now been handed by this affair its most useful British exhibit. The Telegraph, the Times, the Spectator ecosystem, and the American ultra-reactionary media converted the case into a general indictment of diversity politics when policies within days. The affair crossed the Atlantic immediately, mapped onto the Claudine Gay precedent at Harvard, the symbolic appointment, the plagiarism, the scrutiny, the resignation, and was folded straight into the American reactionaries' offensive against their own universities. Now, the stampede here is the story, and none of it was unpredictable. The people who built, protected, and monetized Jason Arday knew, or should have known, exactly how much ammunition a failure like this would hand to the forces of reaction. Secondly, we have the reflexive defense. When the story broke, a large part of the left responded not by checking the evidence, but by reflexively denouncing the fact that any checks had been done at all. The Good Law Project, run by the most perfidious Jolyon Maugham, called the allegations entirely false. Others referred to it as a dedicated, coordinated, and smear campaign from the right. The wretched James O'Brien called the Times' reporting studied and deliberate ignominy. Now, I understand this instinct. The reactionary right was circling, they were using tropes that are racist. But there is a hard truth here. The allegations were substantially documented, independently replicable, and never substantively answered. Every signature on that letter, every dismissal of verified text matches as racism did two kinds of damage. It discredited future defenses of black scholarship by tying it to an indefensible case. And it confirmed for every wavering observer exactly what the reactionaries wanted to claim, which is that the left will defend anyone or anything if the optics demand it. The most honest voices here in this story came from black writers who refused that reflex. Jason Okunde wrote in The Guardian that the takedown had overjoyed the right and must be a wake-up call for the left, that Cambridge had treated Arday not as a scholar, but as a mascot. The Guardian writer Afua Hirsch disclosed that Arday's black peers in sociology had been voicing concerns about him privately for some time, but stayed silent because they knew he would not be treated fairly and that quote, we would all be damaged in the process. And she warned the day before his death that he would become, quote, the stick the right will use to beat back racial equality. And Paul Gilroy, one of the most distinguished black studies scholars in Britain, put the blame where it belongs on both flanks. The, quote, unthinking culture warriors who have supported Arday unconditionally share responsibility with his racist critics for making the life of black academics harder and dragging British higher education deeper into the mire. And then there is one of the sharpest pieces of analysis that hit the mainstream about this affair from the criminologist and co-author of The Rise of the Right, Steve Hall, who is a critic of both neoliberalism and liberal identity politics. Hall argued that Arday was neither a victim or a crook, but, quote, the product of a broken system. Hall's piece is worth reading in full, I would argue. He catalogues the commentariat's free-for-all, the racist pseudoscience, the anti-woke triumphalism, the scientists sneering at sociology, quote, as, quote, a low-value pseudoscience, and then makes the structural point. Academia's top tier is full of over-promoted mediocrities. And Arday became, quote, a scapegoat for what some see as a general decline in academic standards, unquote. His story, Steve Hall writes, quote, belongs to higher education as much as it does to him, and his failures belong to academia. He describes Arday as, quote, a spectacular made to measure poster boy for a university trying to demonstrate its anti racist credentials, allowing Cambridge to, quote, present the vanities of fairness, tolerance, and pristine meritocracy as realities to the general public and to sell an attractive PR image to the government, unquote. And he locates the failure where we have located it tonight. Liverpool John Moores University should have caught the thesis. The previous employers should have checked Arday's biography. Quote from Hall's piece again, all this is nothing more than routine administration, but in the turmoil of today's fearful marketplace, it didn't happen. Hall is right about the poster boy and right about the routine administration. Where I disagree with him is the framing of this being a broken system. The system isn't broken, it worked exactly as it's designed to do. For 3 years, it generated for Cambridge prestige, grants, book sales, and glowing coverage for everyone involved. A machine that functions perfectly for its owners is not broken. It is only broken for the people it runs over. And that distinction matters politically because if you think the system is broken, you call for repairs, better vetting, stricter regulators, politer newspapers. If you understand that the system works exactly as it is designed to work, then you have to call for something else entirely. One more point on the culture war question because it cuts the other way and honesty requires us to say so. The enforcement of academic standards in this country is selective to the point of farce. A Channel 4 report noted that the Cambridge historian William O'Reilly kept his job after being found to have copied a student's work and published it as his own, with a fraction of the attention that Arday received. The right here does not actually care about plagiarism. It cares about which plagiarist is useful. And the liberal institutions don't really care about standards either. They care about which standards are safe to enforce. Both of these things are true at once. Holding them both is what separates analysis from cheerleading. So, what are the class forces at work here? Who benefits? The University of Cambridge had 3 years of globally good publicity as an institution that was able to present itself as having been transformed. The widening participation and race equality industry had a star exhibit for its reports and its funding bids. The publisher had a property whose sales, the scandal, and now the unfortunate death will multiply. The reactionary right has a weapon it will swing for years, and the media economy has had a fortnight's feeding frenzy. The same outlets that once inflated Arday profited again from tearing him to pieces. Who paid? In the end, Jason Arday paid with everything, and his family is paying still. But the bill lands wider than that. Black academics and black students whose position in institutions like Cambridge is now more precarious. Priyam Vada Gopal, organising the Cambridge academics who demanded an independent inquiry, warned of the, quote, grotesque racism the affair has unleashed, and she is right. It is black scholars who will now be audited, second-guessed, and scrutinized by racists who have been emboldened by this case. The integrity of sociology and other disciplines has paid a price as well. Disciplines that do have standards, as the sociologist John Preston insisted this recently, and that are damaged not by the enforcement of standards, but the appearance that standards are optional for those who are institutionally favoured. Working class students pay because they're the ones whose exclusion from elite education was never touched by any of this symbolism, and who will watch the right use it to argue against their presence at all. And one journalist paid with 4 months of his professional life under police investigation for the crime of doing his job. Who escapes scrutiny unless, of course, it is forced? The appointment committees, the Liverpool John Moores University supervisory and examination chain of management, whoever signed off on the March 2026 clearance, the journal editors who corrected rather than retracted, the Cambridge officers who told a reporter to stop making inquiries, those who issued who got Carter up to issue the legally threatening note, those who turned the police loose on a reporter, the publisher's editorial and legal teams who corroborated a narrative that fell apart under 11 days of scrutiny. If the only people ever held accountable in this affair are one man who has unfortunately lost his life and the reporters who exposed him, then the machine will just carry on as normal. So what should we do here? There are 5 things we must bear in mind. Do not, if you are on the left, defend the indefensible. Verification of facts is not racism. The racists in this story are identifiable by their program. Coffness is out there and openly being racist. His hereditarian revolution bullshit, for instance. That racism is not the act of checking of footnotes. Every reflexive defense of an institutionally anointed figure cedes the terrain of standards to the reactionaries. Secondly, turn the inquiry demand structurally. The Cambridge Independent Review must be published in full, and it must publish things, such things as the appointment papers, the references, the handling of the 2023 warnings, and who decided to send a law firm's note to a journalist, and who unleashed the police on the journalist. And the cover-up there must be exposed. We must also refuse the tokenism trap. The answer to Cambridge having 5 black professors in 800 years is not a 6 symbolic hire. It is the abolition of structures that keep the number at 5. The class-filtered admissions pipeline, the casualized labor, the marketized university itself. Representation at the summit of a decayed institution is not emancipation, it's not liberation, it's the cheapest available substitute for it. Fourthly, resist the ludicrous demands from the Pierre Omidyar funded left for an inquiry into British press culture, trumpeted by clowns like Jolyon Maugham. That's never going to change the behavior of the British press. It's a business owned by the ruling class, members of the ruling class. It's run for profit, and it will inflate and deflate human beings according to whatever the news cycle demands. No matter what code of conduct is put in place, the demand should not be polite in newspapers. The demand should be that the means of public information are democratically owned and controlled. Of course, no government is going to do that. And finally, we must take what is useful from critics of the system and discard the rest. Hall's article is useful, but the system is not broken. The system is functioning, as we argued, exactly as it should do. Now, in the coming weeks, the coroner will issue an inquest into Jason Arday's death. The twin Cambridge processes, the appointment inquiry and independent review of university processes and will continue. And the scandals here will continue to unfold. But the machinery here is still running. Tonight somewhere, another appointment committee, another press release, another poster boy or girl will be sought. The whole issue here is over education. Is over a marketized and commercialized system which is groaning under gigantic amounts of debt, which is fundamentally unsustainable, and which cannot deliver the kind of emancipatory education that our class actually needs. Emancipation for anybody does not come through the appointment of a celebrity professor or two, nor is it helped by the destruction of these individuals. The reality is that the university system is just simply a profit center, and the standards are being driven down not by the inclusion of black academics, because God knows there's precious few of those, but by marketization, because of the fact that the universities create products now. They are degree factories designed to churn out as many students with BA or MA or PhD after their names as possible and bank the cash. That's not an institution that is dedicated to learning and inquiry. It is an institution dedicated to profit. And therein lies the true collapse of academic standards. Right. Let's see here. So, thank you everybody for joining the stream tonight. I see. We have a few comments here. Right. Just scrolling through. Right. Okay. Okay, so fascist in the comments. Right. Just going to bin him. There we go. And off you go. I knew that this would attract like fascist type characters, but there you go. Right, so going to leave things there for this evening. Thanks to the 400 plus of you who have tuned in. What I'm going to do is in future, just realize that this is now a bit dark. There is do a Q&A show each week where questions from the streams can be picked up. So I'll do a Q&A covering this one later in the week. More stuff coming up on the Patreon later this week. So we have on Monday the course on Marxist state theory covering Lenin's the Proletarian Revolution and the renegade Kautsky. We have the course on Marxist economics coming up with the second part. With the second part of the outline of a critique of political economy being covered on the commodity, and then we have a Patreon Q&A coming up as well. What the hell is all this? Right, there's the fascist who's hiding behind calling himself an Anglo-Stalinist. All right, dickhead. I'm not even going to fucking bother with you. Goodbye and fucking good night. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Well, I'm not sticking around because I have to go and do other things. Now, I will, however, be back for a Q&A. I'm blocking you because you're just a racialist buffoon who's hiding behind a Stalin emoji. So basically, get fucking knotted. Right. And on that point, me saying get fucking knotted to some racialist clown, I'll leave it there for tonight. Audio of this is available on the Patreon. As always, if you've enjoyed a stance that alienates both racists and woke people, well, welcome to the channel. I hope you'll stick around. Thank you for tuning in. Be back with you again tomorrow on Patreon and another live stream on the main channels on Tuesday of this week. Thanks for tuning in. Back with you again very soon.